Hey there. So we're back again with another reflection. As mentioned at the end of the last one with Tony's Pizza, I was going to continue this to follow on with the next game jam, the Mask Platformer, which I did for the Global Game Jam towards the end of January of 2026. The Mask Platformer is a 2D platformer game developed for the 2026 Global Game Jam, following the theme of Mask. In this game, you control a little cube with the ability to view two different worlds by switching different coloured masks to reach a final goal, whilst trying to get the best time on the global leaderboard. This was a solo project, and my first in the Godot engine, where I programmed and designed the overall game. Following on from Tony's Pizza, I joined the 2026 Global Game Jam with the intention of learning Godot for myself. Having already considered the choice of learning Godot, I didn't want this to hold back other people who were taking part in the jam, so I decided to run this project solo. I also chose to make this game in Godot because of how heavily we learn Unreal Engine through our assignments. Likewise, several lecturers had mentioned how significant and important it would be to familiarize ourselves with not just one engine, but several other public engines. So, considering how user friendly and simple the Godot engine is, this felt like an easy choice. Similarly to the Dink Jam, this took place across a 48-hour period with the theme of Mask. Following on from this, I decided to use an asset pack from a website, which I'll link in the description, that we were shown, which offers free 2D assets. From this, I was able to begin developing a very simple level layout for the player to move around the environment. With the idea of Mask, I wanted the level to have sections that the player could always stand on, but could switch between two different versions of the world to complete the game. To begin with, this started off as a very simple platformer where the player simply had to get from the starting location to a door to end the game. With the basics nailed very early on, I began to think of a more general direction for the game, leading me to pivot towards making the game more of a competitive speedrunning game. I first implemented a timer to show the player the current time they were on, and implemented the ability to reset their run to try to get the best time possible. However, I also wanted to allow people to easily compare their times to those of other people who played the game. This led me to the Godot plugin Silent Wolf, which comes with a pre-made leaderboard to implement straight into the game. This did come with the issue of the slowest time appearing on top, but I did manage to eventually create a workaround. By this point, I was pretty satisfied with this project, struggling to come up with additional developments. I did add collectibles that gave the player a speed boost to help skip jumps, and overall help them try to achieve the fastest time possible. I also made the levels slightly longer, just to add more challenge, as well as adding music and sounds to really finish off the game. Being a global jam, my project was only really shown off amongst other students, and from my own observations, people seemed intrigued by the game. I do think this is a very underrated project of mine, being my first dip into a new game engine, but overall, ticking the boxes I wanted to develop on from Tony's Pizza. The big takeaway from this project is definitely developing this whole project inside of Godot. I had never touched another engine since starting in Unreal Engine back in 2023, but considering that game jams are an opportunity to try and test out new experiences and ideas, I took this as a prime moment to expand this skill. As a designer, but also as someone who has only done visual scripting since the end of my first year of college, switching back to a text-based system was quite daunting at first, but once you get into the swing of the basics, everything becomes a lot easier. On reflection on using the Godot Game Engine, I'm actually really happy I did. It's very user-friendly, it's straightforward to use, and genuinely a fun contrast to the Unreal Engine. Other students and people who took part in this jam, they have always used Unreal Engine, which is primarily the engine for assignments. And I think for a group project, suggesting the use of an entirely new game engine to develop a game within can be quite a shock and stressful. especially if you haven't used it before. But as much as I would like to work more with others, I was more than happy to work solo and experiment alone, especially since convincing a group of people in 48 hours of not only your idea and the engine of choice would have been a tricky task itself. An element of the game I enjoyed implementing was the scoreboard feature for players to showcase the times they were achieving. As mentioned, this was accomplished by the Silent Wolf plugin, something I discovered through a bit of research. Having not really programmed much for a long time and being on a tight time restriction, I didn't have the capacity to actually develop my own leaderboard system, and certainly not one that actually maintained every player's score and compared it against the top 10. So this feature was really useful and saved a big headache on my part, especially with how easy to implement it actually is. On reflection, I was satisfied with how this plugin saved a good chunk of time, but it did come with some headaches of its own. The plugin is very simple, with limited room for you to customize its purpose, apart from messing with its code. This meant that all times would have to be saved in seconds, and originally the longest times would be at the top of the board. I did alter the code for the placement orders by switching some greater than and less than parameters, but even that was a difficult conclusion to come to. I also find the actual leaderboard screen to be a little detached from the overall aesthetic that I wanted for the game, but with the lack of personal knowledge on designing these in any way or modifying the pre existing style, I just settled for how it looked. So, to really improve on this aspect, I did definitely consider developing my own version in the future to include the appropriate direction of scores, a better design, and the correct layout for timings. Another element that I'm happy with is the improvement in the overall player experience of the mass platformer to Tony's Pizza. One of my main gripes with Tony's Pizza is the lack of direction, especially how linear an experience it is. So with the mass platformer, I made sure that every button was detailed on the screen and put the responsibility on actually grasping the game onto the player themselves. I also made sure to include background music that very much fits with the overall tone and fast-paced nature of the game. I also remember on the second day, we were able to hop into a Discord channel to chat with some people from different studios, from Dink, Observer, and Double 11, who were equally taking part themselves, but were also available to offer feedback and look at our games. Um, this for me was a big step because I've always shown my games off to people in person. They've physically been in front of me, so to hop onto a call and talk not only in a room full of people, but also to people that I was actually presenting my work to, but also other students who were waiting to show theirs off, it was a very nerving experience. Ultimately, I did it. I showed off my game, and by first of all showing off my game as a whole, how it worked, and then talking through what I was accomplishing, and that this was obviously my first time using the Godot engine. I was probably expecting some criticism of just things I could improve on, but generally the actual response to it was pretty positive. The industry people were very happy with it. They said it looked really fun, and were very much amazed how this was my first time using the engine, and that it was a pretty decent attempt. Which even some of the students also commented that this was a really great project for the first time inside the Godot engine. To reflect on this project as a whole, I think this is my strongest game jam so far from uni. It ticks the improvements from Tony's Pizza, has a very simple but enjoyable gimmick, and overall is a fun speedrunner game. Let's not forget the first step in trying out different game engines. I think having now taken some time to sit and look back on this game as a whole, I have a greater appreciation for this project. Having taken place between returning to uni from Christmas and starting two new assignments, this very brief period was easily forgotten and overlooked. I remember back in college, one of my tutors told me that I shouldn't undersell myself, that sometimes it's okay to have a bit of an ego over what you created and show people how proud you are of your accomplishments. I haven't thought about that comment since I first heard it back last year, and strangely, this project reminded me of it. I have a couple of problems with Tony's Pizza, from communication to workload and even overall the feel of the game, but this one I struggle to talk about because as much as there are areas of improvement, it's nothing major in my eyes. I love how simple and straightforward the experience is, how it can be a very quick pastime. I mean, I spent 10 minutes recording a playthrough where I actually completed a level, and it's slightly annoying to fail time and time again, but the drive to actually complete the game is quite fun. I'm also just genuinely proud of myself for dipping my toes into a new game engine, because I was very prepared to once again make an Unreal Engine game, but even on the lead up to the jam, I just had Godot on my mind. So I'm quite thankful to myself for trying this out. It's given me the interest in trying out Unity at some point, and to also continue developing very small web-based games that people can just easily access as well. Well, thanks for watching once again. That was the second part in the three-part series where I'll be reflecting on the game jams from my first year at university. The third and final one is Retrofitter from the Athena Game Jam. But yeah, if you've enjoyed and haven't seen the first part, there is the Tony's Pizza reflection to also look at, as well as a whole host of other reflections that I've done throughout college as well. But with nothing less self to say, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you again some other time.